Hi, I'm WTOp film critic Jason Fraley, and all month long we're breaking down my favorite movies in every genre. 30 genres, over 30 days, and today we're taking a look at the best silent movies. Now, when you first think silent flicks, you of course think of the comedies like Charlie Chaplin, the most famous silhouette in history as the little tramp doing the spinning and the mustache, and he's just so iconic. In fact, so iconic that one time, favorite trivia, Charlie Chaplin entered a Charlie Chaplin lookalike contest once in Europe, and he placed third. There were two other people that could do him better than him. That's just amazing. But of course, we get his best movies like The Gold Rush, City Lights, where he dates a blind girl who doesn't know he's the poor little tramp, and in the end she can see and she loves him, and it's just so, I'm tearing up. And of course, Modern Times, which we'll get to in my top three, so we'll save that. But also his contemporary, Buster Keaton. Oh, so great. They called him the Great Stone Face because no matter what happened, he'd slip on a million banana peels and houses would fall around him, or he'd sit on a train like in The General, but his face wouldn't break. It was just so funny. So movies like Sherlock Jr. and The General have to be on here. Their other contemporary, Harold Lloyd, Safety Last. You've seen that image of him hanging from a building on the hands of a clock, just falling, but hanging on for dear life on a skyscraper. And then I think he wasn't their contemporary, but I think he was just like them, Jacques Tati. Playtime, 1967, the French movie. It's in color. I think there might be a little talking from background characters, but the main character that he plays, sort of his little tramp proxy, doesn't talk the whole movie. So I wanted to put him on here. Playtime. We slipped it in here on the comedy silent side. Now, there are also some great silent dramas. We're talking about movies like D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation and Intolerance. Now, this is really tricky. As we just saw in Spike Lee's BlacKkKlansman, where he used clips of this, there was a lot of blackface used. It's so outdated. It's probably the most racist movie you've ever seen because it's about the Klan. It'll piss you off. But I think it's an important historical document because it was the first the first movie ever. It was the first feature-length movie ever. It was an epic. So you have to put it on here for groundbreaking purposes. It's technologically and even story-wise, and basically every element of cinema we use today, D.W. Griffith pioneers with this movie. Maybe it is only fitting that it is the most racist movie ever because that should say a lot about, America. It says a lot about America if you really think about it, that this piece of ingenuity. Even Woodrow Wilson screened it at the White House and said, it's like history written with lightning. But when you look back at it, oh, God. And even Griffith felt so bad about it that he followed up with Intolerance. He heard pushback from people that were like, oh, crap, I just made this most offensive movie ever. He made Intolerance, which was 4 tales of intolerance throughout history, each with a different tint, including the big Babylon sequence with the big structures that towered over Hollywood. Even he tried to have some penance here. Lillian Gish is the woman that's rocking the cradle of mankind. But those two Griffith movies have to be in. The Crowd. King Vidor was a titan of silent cinema. He made The Big Parade, which was a huge blockbuster, but to me his best was The Crowd, 1928, with the camera going up the side of a building. Look how revolutionary it is, and it comes out over all the big desks of the office. It's so great filmmaking. Check it out. Similar to Wings, which was the first Best Picture winner, with that great shot going over William Wellman shot going over all the tables. I think if you think silent movies aren't your type, go back and look at it as a way to learn visual storytelling. We saw it with A Quiet Place, for instance. John Krasinski, obviously a modern horror movie, but it's the same concept of that you can do so much visual storytelling without dialogue. And honestly, I think it'll teach you to direct better than any other modern movie if you want to just turn it sounds off and watch the visual storytelling. We get von Stroheim's Greed. We get Battleship Potemkin, which was a Soviet montage starting it off with Sergei Eisenstein. The way the ships move around. And the idea of a montage, we've heard of, you've seen Rocky, the training montages, but montages were, think about it, they had to have started somewhere, right? It's a crazy concept. This Russian, Sergei Eisenstein, came up with the idea during the famous Odessa step sequence, the baby carriage going down, the way it cuts around with a woman screaming and shot through the eye and the carriage falling down. De Palma referenced it in The Untouchables. It's that iconic. So Battleship Potemkin. We get Fritz Lang's Metropolis. I don't think C-3PO would look the same without this character here, the transformation that we go with a robot. But look at it again. It's a commentary on class divides. You know, you have the people above the surface, the rich folks with the technology, and then you have all the poor people living underground. Check out the class divides there. And then of course F.W. Murnau, Nosferatu, 1922, the first Dracula movie, really. Max Schreck. They do some weird things, like even watching him, I don't know if they shot it in reverse motion, but he starts down and he raises up into the shot. It's so creepy. Bela Lugosi would later do it in Hollywood with an iconic Dracula, but Max Schreck and Murnau's directing did it here in Nosferatu. German expressionism at its best. And then, of course, Murnau, when he got to Hollywood, probably the pinnacle of the silent age, 1927, Sunrise. Go back and look at all of the dissolves and things here, the way that they superimpose things and fade in and out. It is a masterclass of directing. Global critics will repeatedly put it in top 10 lists, ever, sometimes top 5. It is a masterpiece, because I think it's 1927. That's the same year The Jazz Singer came out, which is, of course, you ain't heard nothing yet. That's when talk happened, talkies happened. But Sunrise was that same year, and it was almost like the best last gasp of the silent era. Check it out. So of all those great silent flicks, including The Artist, we did sneak that in there, a modern one. But of all of those, the top 3 was easy for me. Number 3, and you call this a swerve because it's like a bit of a documentary too, but it's also silent. Man with a Movie Camera. A lot of people have not seen this, but it's 1929, Dziga Vertov, Soviet, Russian movie. But man, check it out. It is all about a cameraman carrying a camera around town and filming things, almost like a travelogue, like an urban city medley, if you will. But I'm telling you, the camera work and the cutting here, and the montages, and sort of the idea of what you can do with juxtaposed images where A plus B equals C. Oh my God, go watch it. I wanted to put it in the top 3 because most people haven't heard of it, but I love it. It's one of my favorite that I ever watched in film school. Man with a Movie Camera. Number 2, Buster Keaton's The General. We mentioned it earlier, but man, just Buster Keaton was so good in this. He gets on a train, and it's scary action stuff too, but it's so comedic with the slapstick and the pratfalls. But the crazy thing about this is, yeah, it's funny, and yeah, there's moments where he's like sitting on the train thing as it's going around, but in addition to the comedy, it's scary action. Like, he's doing all these stunts himself in the 1926, 27. He co-directs it. But man, like, watch as he's on top of the train. You're gonna gasp. I'm telling you, you're gonna gasp because he's doing all this himself. And the timing of some of it, you know, he has to run across the top. He has to throw a 2x4 in the distance that hits something and sets off a cannon. And it's like, how did they do all this? But he's climbing down onto the cow catcher on the front of the train. You know, the little metal thing on the front of the train. He climbs down on it and rides it. This guy could have easily died. Buster Keaton, the great stoneface, number 2 forever. But number 1, of course, Charlie Chaplin. My favorite, Modern Times. People love City Lights. People love The Gold Rush. People love shorts like The Kid. He did in The Great Dictator, in a talking picture. But man, Modern Times is my favorite silent movie of his. When I think of all my favorite Chaplin moments, they're in this movie. You have him in the beginning. You know, remember when I Love Lucy was on the conveyor belt with the chocolates and they're trying to eat it? That comes from this. Because Chaplin is tightening the nuts on on this conveyor belt, and he can't keep up. And suddenly he jumps on the conveyor belt and goes down into the gears of the machine. It is symbolic for, it's called Modern Times. It's for mankind getting eaten by the Industrial Revolution, basically, literally in that phrase. And he opens it with a dissolve from sheep walking down the street to workers rushing into their factory. It's a dissolve, and he's calling us all sheep to slaves to the machines. There's so much going on, but it's also just flat out funny. There's the feeding machine. They're like, let's try this feeding machine, and it just keeps slapping things in his face, and the little thing keeps wiping his mouth, and he's like, oh, boop, boop, boop. No one could do it like Chaplin. There's so many great scenes. He even teased that this was his last one as the Little Tramp, mid-30s. He'd done all the movies as the silent star, and he said, I'm gonna talk in this one. Just watch. He teases you and waits, and the whole movie is not talking. What's going on? And it finally builds up where he's a singing waitress at a restaurant. Everyone's like, here he goes. He's gonna open his mouth, and what does he do? He sings in another language. It's the ultimate stick it to you, or if it's Friends, it's that, right? Or what is it? It's that. But man, Chaplin, it's just great. And then the great final image of him and the girl walking, you know, the Little Tramp, imagine from behind, walking down the middle of the street into the sunset as his last role. Come on, Modern Times. The greatest silent movie of all time. See my top 25 silent flicks on WTOp.com's entertainment page. Tell us what you think on the blog, and tune in tomorrow as we break down my favorite sports movies.